Ibrahim Traoré, shocking message to all blacks in the USA. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's transitional president, sent a direct message to African descendants in the Americas calling for a return to African roots and strengthening of Pan-African ties. The statement, made through unconventional diplomatic channels, triggered a series of political events, including the creation of Operation Sankofa, the organization of a Diaspora Congress, and an attempt to destabilize the Burkinabé government, revealing deep geopolitical tensions about the future of Africa-West relations.
Il faut que nous, chefs d'État africains, nous arrêtons de nous comporter donc en marionnettes qui dansent à chaque fois que les impérialistes tirent sur les ficelles. Hier, le président Vladimir Poutine a annoncé donc l'envoi de céréales en Afrique. Nous sommes bien contents. Nous lui disons merci pour cela. Mais aussi, c'est un message passé à nous, chefs d'État africains, parce qu'au prochain forum, nous ne devrons pas venir ici sans avoir assuré, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas la guerre, l'autosuffisance alimentaire de nos peuples. Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie pour pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations.
Behind the scenes at the Kosiam Presidential Palace, Traoré's decision to speak directly to the African diaspora had been maturing during months of secret meetings. Internal documents reveal that the strategy was part of a broader plan called Project Baobab, a reference to the sacred African tree that symbolizes ancestry and resistance. The Council of Ministers, meeting in extraordinary session 3 days before the statement, intensely debated the political risks of the initiative. Some colleagues expressed concern about possible international retaliation, confides a source close to the government, who prefers to remain anonymous. But the captain was categorical. Our sovereignty is not built by asking permission from former colonizers. Technical preparation of the speech. The presidential communication team, led by young director Mamadou Sawadogo, worked with digital media specialists from Ghana and Senegal to ensure maximum reach of the message. We created a distribution strategy that bypassed the algorithms of major platforms, explains Sawadogo. We knew the content would be sensitive to certain interests, so we developed alternative channels. The RTB studio was equipped with special transmission technology, including encryption equipment provided by Chinese and Russian partners. The total investment in the communication operation reached 2.3 million CFA francs, resources approved discreetly by the Ministry of Communication. Immediate impact in the Americas. In New York, historian Dr. Julius Patterson, a Columbia University professor specializing in Africa-America relations, was finishing his book on contemporary Pan-Africanism when he received the video link. I had to watch it 3 times to fully process it, Patterson reports. Traoré wasn't doing traditional diplomacy. He was establishing a direct spiritual and political connection. The message arrived simultaneously to community leaders in Detroit, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Salvador, Brazil, Kingston, Jamaica, and Port-au-Prince, Haiti. In each city, the initial reaction was surprise, followed by unprecedented organic mobilization. In California, entrepreneur Malik Washington, owner of a chain of African restaurants, canceled business meetings to organize an emergency gathering in his community. More than 200 people showed up at my house, Washington recounts. People I hadn't seen in years, young and old, all wanting to discuss what those words meant to us. Divergent institutional reactions. At the U.S. State Department, Undersecretary for African Affairs Robertson convened an emergency meeting of the Regional Task Force. Documents later released through the Freedom of Information Act show that the American administration classified the statement as external interference in domestic affairs. Simultaneously, American embassies in African countries received instructions to monitor local reactions and identify possible repercussions on regional stability. The American ambassador in Ouagadougou, Sandra Morrison, was instructed to request official clarifications about the Burkinabé government's intentions. Contrary to the American position, the African Union issued a statement of support through its spokesperson, Ethiopian diplomat Dr. Desta Mahari. We recognize the sovereign right of member states to establish links with communities of African origin worldwide. Movement structuring. The Malcolm X Cultural Center in Detroit became the unofficial epicenter of American mobilization. In the weeks following Traoré's statement, delegations from 23 American cities converged on Michigan to establish the organizational foundations of Operation Sankofa. We needed real structure, not just enthusiasm, explains Kimberly Washington, who assumed general coordination of the movement. We created specialized committees: international relations, economic development, education and culture, and strategic communication. Lawyer James Robinson, former Congressional Black Caucus consultant, brought crucial legal expertise. My function was to ensure all activities were within American legality, Robinson clarifies. We were dealing with foreign policy issues, international financial transfers, and possible registration as foreign government agents. Strategic Partnership Development. Operation Sankofa established formal partnerships with existing organizations. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, maintained a cautious official position, but local leaders like Charles Williams, president of the Atlanta section, offered discreet logistical support. We couldn't officially endorse an initiative with foreign policy implications, Williams explains. But we recognized the cultural and historical legitimacy of reconnection with Africa. The Trans-Africa Forum, an organization traditionally focused on African foreign policy, became an official partner. Its president, Nicole Lee, declared, "This is exactly the mission we were created for, connecting the struggle for justice in the United States with the struggle for sovereignty in Africa." Internal political reactions. The Congressional Black Caucus was internally divided. While congresspeople like Maxine Waters expressed sympathy for cultural reconnection objectives, others like James Clyburn warned of possible manipulations by authoritarian governments. Representative Hakeem Jeffries convened a hearing in the House Subcommittee on African Affairs to examine the implications of growing African political influence on American communities. The hearing, held in May 2025, featured testimony from national security experts and community leaders. Monitoring and countermeasures. Parallel to community mobilization, American security agencies intensified monitoring of activities related to Operation Sankofa. The FBI opened a preliminary investigation under the foreign influence category, focusing specifically on possible financial transfers between the Burkinabé government and American organizations. We received regular visits from federal agents, recounts Marcus Johnson from the Pan-African Institute of Atlanta. Always very polite, always within the law, but the message was clear: they were watching. The federal investigation did not result in criminal charges, but led to the creation of strict financial transparency protocols. All organizations linked to Operation Sankofa began publishing monthly reports of income and expenses, including detailed donations and international partnerships. Expansion to other countries. The American model of Operation Sankofa inspired similar movements in other countries. In Brazil, Operation Quilombo was launched in Sao Paulo under the leadership of activist Conceição Santos, bringing together representatives from 15 Brazilian states. Captain Traoré's message resonated deeply in the Brazilian Black community, Santos explains. We have 54% of the population with African ancestry. Reconnection is not just cultural, it's strategic for our development. In Jamaica, the renewed Garvey movement mobilized Rastafarians and Pan-Africanist intellectuals. Prime Minister Andrew Holness issued an official statement supporting legitimate initiatives to strengthen historical ties between Jamaica and Africa, signaling discreet governmental support. International preparations and logistics. The organization of the first contemporary Pan-African Diaspora Congress mobilized significant resources from the Burkinabé state. The total budget, approved in a secret Council of Ministers session, reached 4.8 billion CFA francs, including construction of temporary infrastructure, special security, and subsidies for delegates from low-income countries. The Ministry of African Integration created a special secretariat led by diplomat Fatimata Ouedraogo, former ambassador to Washington. It was like organizing 3 simultaneous events, Ouedraogo reports: a political congress, an economic forum, and a cultural festival, all integrated into a narrative of historical reconnection. The selection of delegates followed rigorous criteria established by a mixed government civil society commission. Priority was given to community leaders, intellectuals, entrepreneurs, and artists with proven trajectory of commitment to African or Afro-descendant issues. Growing diplomatic tensions. As the Congress date approached, diplomatic pressure on Burkina Faso intensified through multiple channels. France, through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, expressed concern about events that could contribute to regional instability. French Ambassador Philippe Lacoste was instructed to present an official note questioning the adequacy of political initiatives involving citizens of third countries. The Burkinabé response, delivered by Chancellor Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, was diplomatically firm. Burkina Faso claims its sovereign right to establish relations with all communities of African origin. Simultaneously, economic pressures began to materialize. The World Bank temporarily suspended the release of resources from a $200 million loan destined for infrastructure projects, alleging need for reassessment of local political conditions. Regional security movements. Burkinabé intelligence reports identified unusual activity in border regions with Mali and Niger. Unidentified armed groups were spotted in remote areas, raising suspicions about possible preparations for destabilizing actions. General Celestin Simpor ordered reinforcement of border security, including aerial patrol with recently acquired Chinese drones. We received fragmented but convergent information, Simpor explains. Resource movement, encrypted communications, contacts between external elements and internal opposition figures. The G5 Sahel Joint Force, which includes Burkina Faso, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Chad, was discreetly alerted about possible threats to regional stability related to political events in Ouagadougou. However, Mali and Niger, governed by military juntas aligned with Traoré, offered security support instead of expressing concern. Obstacles to international participation. The American delegation faced systematic bureaucratic obstacles. Initially, 127 passports were retained by the State Department under the allegation of additional security verifications. The measure was reversed after political pressure, but generated a 2-week delay in visa issuance. Subsequently, American Airlines were advised to review flight policies to Burkina Faso due to updated security assessments. Delta and United canceled charter flights contracted by Operation Sankofa, forcing the delegation to use connections through Casablanca and Dakar. It was classic bureaucratic sabotage, evaluates lawyer James Robinson. Nothing illegal, nothing that could be legally contested, but sufficient to complicate our participation. Delegations from other countries faced similar pressures. The British government strongly recommended that British citizens of Caribbean origin reconsider the trip. Germany temporarily suspended visas for German citizens visiting Burkina Faso, affecting delegates from the significant Afro-German community. Articulation of African response. In response to external pressures, African countries, governed by progressive leaders, coordinated explicit support for the event. Senegalese President Macky Sall announced that Senegal would send an official delegation of 45 people, including ministers and entrepreneurs. Ghana, through its President Nana Akufo-Addo, offered logistical support, allowing delegations to use Accra as a connection hub. Kotoka Airport became a concentration point for participants facing difficulties with direct flights to Ouagadougou. South Africa, despite Western pressures, maintained a supportive position. The South African Department of International Relations issued an official statement recognizing the historical importance of reconnection between Africa and its global diaspora. Discovery of the conspiracy. The intelligence operation that discovered the coup plans was jointly coordinated by Burkinabé, Malian, and Nigerian secret services. Unprecedented cooperation between the 3 military juntas in the region. The investigative work lasted 6 weeks and involved communication interception, infiltration of conspiratorial networks, and tracking of suspicious financial movements. We discovered a complex network, reveals a source from Burkinabé Intelligence Services, under condition of anonymity. It wasn't just internal opposition. There was international coordination, significant external resources, and a precise timeline that coincided exactly with the Diaspora Congress. The most concerning element of the discovery was the technical sophistication of the conspiracy. The coup plotters used encrypted communication systems similar to those employed by professional intelligence agencies, suggesting high-level external technical assistance. Profile of the conspirators. Among the 8 detainees in the national cleanup operation, the most surprising was General Barthélemy Simpor, distant cousin of the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. A respected military man, Simpor had commanded operations against terrorist groups in the north of the country and maintained cordial relations with the Traoré government. The discovery of General Simpor's involvement was a shock, admits a senior armed forces officer. He had access to sensitive information, knew our security protocols, and enjoyed institutional trust. Entrepreneur Moussa Ouedraogo, another prominent detainee, controlled a network of companies with government contracts in civil construction and equipment supply. Subsequent investigations revealed that his companies had been used for money laundering resources destined for conspiracy financing. Documentation of external interference. Documents seized during the arrests included electronic correspondence that compromised political figures from neighboring countries and references to international partners interested in regime change. A particularly revealing email, dated 3 weeks before the coup attempt, mentioned guarantees of immediate international recognition of the new government. Bank transfers traced by investigators originated from accounts registered in Luxembourg, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands, following patterns typical of intelligence operations with government financing. The total amount identified reached 18 million euros, far superior to resources normally available to domestic opposition movements. The financing pattern was unequivocal, explains Burkinabé Justice Minister Idasso Rodrigue Bayala. Small regular transfers, always below limits requiring automatic notification, coordinated through multiple financial institutions. It's a classic intelligence operation signature. The Historic Congress. Held under a special security scheme, the Diaspora Congress acquired additional symbolism after the frustrated coup attempt. The presence of 847 delegates from 31 countries, protected by Burkinabé, Malian, and Nigerian security forces, transformed the event into a demonstration of Pan-African unity. The opening ceremony featured presentations by artists from 12 countries, including American rapper Talib Kweli, Brazilian singer Elza Soares in her last international performance, and Senegalese group Yasson Daour. The spectacle, broadcast live by 23 African broadcasters, reached an estimated audience of 50 million people. The Ouagadougou Declaration, Content and Implications. The Congress's final document established concrete commitments that transcended political symbolism. The creation of the Pan-African University of the Diaspora, headquartered in Ouagadougou with campuses in Atlanta, Salvador, and Kingston, received an initial endowment of $200 million, financed jointly by African governments and diaspora organizations. The Return to Origins program institutionalized procedures to facilitate immigration of African descendants to participating African countries. Burkina Faso, Ghana, Senegal, and Mali committed to offering permanent residence visas for African descendants who prove a minimum investment of $50,000 in local projects. The Pan-African Development Fund, with initial subscribed capital of $500 million, will prioritize infrastructure, education, and technology projects involving partnerships between African countries and diaspora communities. Management will be shared between African government representatives and leaders elected by diaspora organizations. Regional geopolitical repercussions. The Congress's success catalyzed significant regional political changes. The Confederation of Sahel States, a bloc formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger after their respective exits from ECOWAS, announced the creation of a diaspora secretariat to coordinate reconnection policies with global African communities. Ivory Coast, despite its initially cautious position, signaled interest in adhering to protocols established in Ouagadougou. President Alassane Ouattara declared that Ivory Coast cannot remain on the margins of the historic movement of African reunification. Ghana intensified its own reconnection programs, launching the National Sankofa Project, with a budget of 100 million cedis to facilitate the return of African descendants. President Nana Akufo-Addo announced that Ghana will offer automatic citizenship to anyone who proves Ghanaian ancestry through genetic testing. Transformations in the Americas. In the United States, Operation Sankofa evolved into a network of 340 formally registered organizations, coordinating activities ranging from educational exchanges to direct investments in African agriculture and technology. Business volume between African American organizations and African companies grew 340% in the 6 months following the Congress. In Brazil, Operation Quilombo established partnerships with state governments of Bahia, Sao Paulo, and Rio de Janeiro to create exchange programs with African universities. The Federal University of Bahia launched the first master's degree in contemporary African diaspora studies, with 50% of places reserved for students from African countries. The legacy and future perspectives. 6 months after the initial statement, consequences continue to unfold through lasting institutional transformations. The June 15th movement, reference to the date of the frustrated coup attempt, established itself as a permanent political force in 14 African countries, all committed to policies of continental sovereignty and diaspora reconnection. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who completed 2 years in power during the Diaspora Congress, consolidated himself as a globally prominent Pan-Africanist leader. His government announced plans to host, in 2026, the Second World Congress of the African Diaspora, with expected participation of 2,000 delegates from 50 countries. What we started in March 2025 is irreversible, Traoré declared in his Congress closing speech. Africa was reborn politically, economically, and spiritually. And this time it was reborn complete, reunited with all its children, building indestructible bridges between the motherland and its global communities. For international analysts, the Traoré phenomenon represents a paradigmatic change in South-South relations and a direct challenge to Western hegemony over global African communities. Political scientist Dr. Kwame Asani summarizes, "For the first time since independence, we have an organic, structured, and politically coordinated connection between Africa and its diaspora. This fundamentally alters the global geopolitical balance.